Brown Girl Dreaming, Part 2. The stories of South Carolina run like rivers. Our names. In South Carolina, we become the grandchildren, Gunner's 3 little ones, Sister Irby's grands, Mary Ann's babies. But when we are called by our names, my grandmother makes them all one, Hope Del Jackie. But my grandfather takes a sweet time, saying each one as if he has all day long for a whole lifetime. Ohio behind us. When we ask our mother how long we'll be here, sometimes she says, for a while, and sometimes she tells us not to ask anymore, because she doesn't know how long we'll stay in the house where she grew up, on the land she's always known. When we ask, she tells us this is where she used to belong, but her sister Caroline, our Aunt Kay, has moved to the north, and her brother Odell is dead now, and her baby brother Robert says he's almost saved enough money to follow Caroline to New York City. Maybe I should go there too, my mother says. Everyone else, she says, has a new place to be now. Everyone else has gone away. And now coming back home isn't really coming back home at all. The garden. Each spring, the dark Nickeltown dirt is filled with the promise of what the earth can give back to you if you work the land, plant the seeds, pull the weeds. My southern grandfather missed slavery by 1 generation. His grandfather had been owned. His father worked the land from dawn till dusk for the promise of cotton and a little pay. So this is what he believes in, your hands in the cool dirt until the earth gives back to you all that you've asked of it. Sweet peas and collards, green peppers and cukes, lettuce and melon, berries and peaches, and one day, when I'm able, my grandfather says, I'm gonna figure out how to grow myself a pecan tree. God gives you what you need, my grandmother says. Best not ask for more than that. Said my grandfather, and goes back to working the land, pulling from it all we need and more than that. Gunner's children. At dusk, just as the fireflies flicker on, my grandfather makes his way home. We see him coming slow down the road, his silver lunchbox bouncing soft against his leg. Now as he gets closer, we hear him singing, where will the wedding supper be? Way down yonder in a hollow tree. Good evening, Miss Clara. Evening, Miss May. How's that leg, Miss Belle? What you cooking, Auntie Charlotte? You thinking of making me something to eat? His voice ringing down Hall Street, circling round the roads of Nickeltown, and maybe out into the big wide world. Maybe all the way up in New York, Aunt Kay's hearing it and thinking about coming on home. Then he is close enough to run to, the 3 of us climbing him like a tree until he laughs out loud. We call him Daddy. This is what our mother calls him. This is all we know now. Our Daddy seems taller than everyone else in all of Greenville. More handsome, too. His square jaw and light brown eyes, so different from our own, narrow-faced, dark-eyed selves. Still, his hand is warm and strong around my own as I skip beside him. The wind blowing up around us, he says, y'all are Gunner's children. Just keep remembering that. Just keep remembering. This is the way of Nickeltown evenings. Daddy coming home, me jumping into his arms, and the others circling around him. All of us grinning, all of us talking, all of us loving him up. At the end of the day, there are white men working at the printing press beside Daddy, their fingers blackened with ink so that at the end of the day, palms up, it's hard to tell who's white and who's not. Still, they call my grandfather Gunner, even though he's a foreman and is supposed to be called Mr. Irby. But he looks the white men in the eye, sees the way so many of them can't understand a colored man telling them what they need to do. This is new, too fast for them. The South is changing. Sometimes they don't listen. Sometimes they walk away. At the end of the day, the newspaper is printed, the machines are shut down, and Each man punches a clock and leaves, but only colored folks come home to Nickeltown. Here you can't look right or left or up or down without seeing brown people. Colored town, brown town, even a few mean words to say where we live. My grandmother tells us it's the way of the South. Colored folks used to stay where they were told they belonged. But times are changing, and people are itching to go where they want. This evening, though, I am happy to belong to Nickeltown. Day work. There is day work for colored women. In the mornings, their dark bodies fill the crosstown buses, taking them away from Nickeltown to the other side of Greenville, where the white people live. Our grandmother tells us that this as she puts a small hat with a topaz pin on her head, pulls white gloves over her soft brown hands. 2 days a week she joins the women, taking the second job now that there are 4 more mouths to feed, and the money she gets from part-time teaching isn't enough anymore. I'm not ashamed, she says. Cleaning is what I know. I'm not ashamed if it feeds my children. When she returns in the evening, her hands are ashen from washing other people's clothes, most often by hand. Her ankles swollen from standing all day, making beds and sweeping floors, shaking dust from curtains, picking up after other people's children, cooking, the list goes on. And on. Don't any of you ever do day work, she warns us. I'm doing it now so you don't have to. And maybe all across Nickeltown, other children are hearing this too. Get the Epsom salts, she says, leaning back into the soft brown chair, her eyes closing. When she isn't in it, Hope, Delle, and I squeeze in side by side, and still there is space left for one more. We fill a dishpan with warm water, pour the salts in, swirl it around, and carefully carry it to her feet. We fight to see who will get to rub the swelling from grandmother's ankles, the smile back on her face, the stories back into the too quiet room. You could have eaten off the floor by the time I left this house today. My grandmother begins, letting out a heavy sigh. But let me tell you, when I first got there, you would have thought the devil himself had come through. Lullaby. At night, every living thing competes for a chance to be heard. The crickets and the frogs call out. Sometimes there's a soft hoo-hoo of an owl lost amid the pines. Even the dogs won't rest until they've howled at the moon, but the crickets always win, long after the frogs stop croaking and the owl has found its way home. Long after the dogs have lain down, losing the battle against sleep, the crickets keep going as though they know their song is our lullaby. Bible times. My grandmother keeps her Bible on a shelf beside her bed. When the day is over, she reads quietly to herself, and in the morning she'll tell us the stories, how Noah listened to God's word, pulled 2 of each animal inside his ark, waited for the rains to come, and floated safely as the sinners drowned. It's morning now, and we have floated safely through the Nickeltown night. Our evening prayers, Jehovah, please give us another day, now answered. Biscuits warm and buttered stop halfway in our mouths. How much rain did it take to destroy the sinners? What lies did they tell to die such a death? How loud was the rain when it came? How did Noah know that the cobra wouldn't bite, the bull wouldn't charge, and the bee wouldn't sting? Our questions came fast, but we want the stories more than we want the answers. So when my grandmother says, "Hush so I can tell it," we do. Jacob's dream of a ladder to heaven, and Jesus with the children surrounding him. Moses on the mountain, fire burning words into stone. Even Salome intrigues us, her wish for a man's head on a platter. Who could want this and live to tell the story of that wanting? Autumn is coming. Outside there's the sound of wind through the pine trees, and inside there are stories where there are biscuits and grits and eggs, the fire in the pot-bellied stove, already filling the house with warmth. Still we shiver at the thought of evil Salome, chew our biscuits slowly. We are safe here, miles and years away from Bible times. The Reader. When we can't find my sister, we know she is under the kitchen table, a book in her hand, a glass of milk and a small bowl of peanuts beside her. We know we can call Odella's name out loud, slap the table hard with our hands, dance round it singing, "She'll be coming round the mountain." So many times the song makes us sick and the circling makes us dizzy, and still my sister will do nothing more than slowly turn the page. The Beginning. I cannot write a word yet, but at 3 I now know the letter J. I love the way it curves into a hook that I carefully top with a straight hat, the way my sister has taught me to do. Love the sound of the letter and the promise that one day this will be connected to a full name, my own, that I will be able to write by myself, without my sister's hand over mine, making it do what it cannot do yet. How amazing these words are that slowly come to me. How wonderfully on and on they go. Will the words end? I ask whenever I remember to. Nope, my sister says, all of 5 years old now, and promising me infinity. Hope. The South doesn't agree with my brother. The heat sandpapers his skin. Don't scratch, my grandmother warns, but he does, and the skin grows raw beneath his fingers. The pollen leaves him puffy-eyed. His small breaths come quick, have too much sound around them. He moves slow, sickly now where once he was strong. And when his body isn't betraying him, Ohio does. The memories waking him in the night, the view from my father's shoulders, the wonder of the Nelsonville house, the air so easy to breathe. You can keep your South, my father had said. Now Hope stays mostly quiet, unless asked to speak, his head bent inside the superhero comic books my grandfather brings home on Fridays. Hope searches for himself inside their pages, leaves them dog-eared by Monday morning. The South, his mortal enemy. The South, his kryptonite. The Almost Friends. There's the boy from up the road with the hole in his heart. Some afternoons he comes to sit in our yard and listen to our stories. Our Aunt Kay, we tell him, lives in New York City, and maybe we will too someday. And yes, it's true. Once we lived in Ohio. That's why we speak the way we do. We don't ask about the hole in his heart. Our grandmother warns us we know better than that. There is Cora and her sisters across the road. One word in my grandmother's mouth. You stay away from Cora and her sisters. Their mother left the family, ran off with the church pastor. Cora and her sisters sometimes sit watching us. We watch them back, not asking what it feels like to not have a mother, because our grandmother warns us we know better than that. There are 3 brothers who live down the road. We know this only because our grandmother tells us. They live inside their dark house all summer, coming out in the evening when their mother returns from work, long after we've bathed and slipped into our summer pajamas, books curled into our arms. These are our almost friends, the people we think about when we're tired of playing with each other. But our grandmother says, 3 is plenty, 3 is a team, find something to do together. So over and over again, we do. Even though we want to ask her, why can't we play with them? We don't. We know better than that. The right way to speak. The first time my brother says ain't, my mother pulls a branch from the willow tree growing down the hill at the edge of our backyard. As she slips her closed hand over it, removing the leaves, my brother begins to cry, because the branch is a switch now, no longer beautifully weeping at the bottom of the hill. It whirs as my mother whips it through the air down against my brother's legs. You will never, my mother says, say ain't in this house. You will never say ain't anywhere. Each switching is a warning to us. Our words are to remain crisp and clear. We are never to say huh, ain't, or y'all, get, or gonna. Never ma'am, just yes, with eyes meeting eyes enough to show respect. Don't ever ma'am anyone. the word too painful a memory for my mother, of not so long ago, South subservient days. The list of what not to say goes on and on. You are from the North, our mother says. You know the right way to speak. As the switch raises dark welts on my brother's legs, Dell and I look on, afraid to open our mouths, fearing the South will slip out or into them. The Candy Lady. On Fridays, our grandfather takes us to the Candy Lady's house, even though our grandmother worries he's going to be the cause of our teeth rotting right out of our heads. But my grandfather just laughs, makes us open our mouths to show the strong, herby teeth we've inherited from his side of the family. The three of us stand there, our mouths open wide, strong white teeth inside, and my grandmother has to nod, has to say, "They're lucky," before sending us on our way. The Candy Lady's small living room is filled with shelves and shelves of chocolate bars and gumdrops, good and plenty, and jujubes, moon pies and Nico wafers, lollipops, and long red licorice sticks. So much candy that it's hard to choose, until our grandfather says, "Get what you want, but I'm getting myself some ice cream." Then the Candy Lady, who is gray-haired and never smiles, disappears into another room and returns a few minutes later with a wafer cone, pale yellow lemon chiffon ice cream dripping from it. Outside, even this late in the afternoon, the sun is beating down, and the idea of lemon chiffon ice cream cooling us, even for a few minutes, makes us all start saying at once, "Me too, Daddy, me too, Daddy, me too." The walk home from the Candy Lady's house is a quiet one, except for the sound of melting ice cream being slurped up fast before it slides past our wrists, on down our arms, and onto the hot, dry road. South Carolina at war. Because we have a right, my grandfather tells us. We are sitting at his feet, and the story tonight is why people are marching all over the South. To walk and sit and dream wherever we want. First they brought us here, then we worked for free. Then it was 1863, and we were supposed to be free, but we weren't. And that's why people are so mad. And it's true, we can't turn on the radio without hearing about the marching. We can't go to downtown Greenville without seeing the teenagers walking into stores, sitting where brown people still aren't allowed to sit, and getting carried out, their bodies limp, their faces calm. This is the way brown people have to fight, my grandfather says. You can't just put your fist up. You have to insist on something. Gently. Walk towards a thing. Slowly. But be ready to die, my grandfather says, for what is right. Be ready to die, my grandfather says, for everything you believe in. And none of us can imagine death, but we try to imagine it anyway. Even my mother joins the fight. When she thinks our grandmother isn't watching, she sneaks out to meet the cousins downtown. But just as she's stepping through the door, her good dress and gloves on, my grandmother says, "Now don't go getting arrested." And Mama sounds like a little girl when she says, "I won't." More than 100 years, my grandfather says, and we're still fighting for the free life we're supposed to be living. So there's a war going on in South Carolina, and even as we play and plant and preach and sleep, we are a part of it. Because you're colored, my grandfather says, and just as good and bright and beautiful and free as anybody, and nobody colored in the South is stopping, my grandfather says, until everybody knows what's true. The training. When my mother's older cousin and best friend Dorothy comes with her children, they run off saying they can't understand the way Hope, Dell, and I speak. "Y'all go too fast," they say, and the words get all pushed together. They say they don't feel like playing with us little kids, so they leave us to walk the streets of Nickeltown when we can't leave the porch. We watch them go, hear Cousin Dorothy say, "Don't you knuckleheads get into trouble out there." Then we stay close to Cousin Dorothy, make believe we're not listening when she knows we are, laughing when she laughs, shaking our heads when she shakes hers. You know how you have to get those trainings, she says, and our mother nods. They won't let you sit at the counters without them. Have to know what to do when those people come at you. She has a small space between her teeth, like my mother's space, and Hope's, and Delle's too. She is tall and dark-skinned, beautiful and broad-shouldered. She wears gloves and dark-colored dresses made for her by a seamstress in Charleston. The trainings take place in the basements of churches, in the backs of rooms of stores, and on long car trips and anywhere else where people can gather. They learn how to change the South without violence, how to not be moved by the evil actions of others, how to walk slowly but with deliberate steps, how to sit at counters and be cursed at without cursing back, have food and drinks poured over them without standing up and hurting someone. Even the teenagers get trained to sit tall, not cry, swallow back fear. But Lord, Cousin Dorothy says, everybody has a line. When I'm walking up to that lunch counter and taking my seat, I pray to God, don't let anybody spit on me. I can be sweet Dorothy 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, as long as nobody crosses that line. Because if they do, this nonviolent movement is over. The blanket. The first time my mother goes to New York City, it is only for a long weekend visit. Her kiss on our cheeks, as much a promise as the excitement in her eyes. I'll bring something back for each of you. It's Friday night, and the weekend ahead is already calling us to the Candy Lady's house, my hand and Daddy's. He doesn't know how to say no, my grandmother complains, but neither does she. Dresses and socks and ribbons, our hair pressed and curled. She calls my sisters and me her baby girls, smiles proudly when the women say how pretty we are. So the first time my mother goes to New York City, we don't know to be sad. The weight of our grandparents' love, like a blanket, with us beneath it, safe and warm. Miss Belle and the Marchers. They look like regular people visiting our neighbor Miss Belle. Foil-covered dishes held out in front of them as they arrive, some in pairs, some alone, some just little kids holding their mother's hands. If you didn't know, you'd think it was just an evening gathering, maybe church people heading to Miss Belle's house to talk about God. But when Miss Belle pulls her blinds closed, the people fill their dinner plates with food, their glasses with sweet tea, and gather to talk about marching. And even though Miss Belle works with a white lady who said, "I will fire you in a minute if I ever see you on that line," Miss Belle knows that marching isn't the only thing she can do, knows that people fighting need full bellies to think and safe places to gather. She knows the white lady isn't the only one who's watching, listening, waiting to end this fight. So she keeps the marchers' glasses filled, adds more cornbread and potato salad to their plates, stands in the kitchen ready to slice lemon pound cake into generous pieces. And in the morning, just before she pulls her uniform from the closet, she prays, "God, please give me and those people marching another day. Amen." How to Listen, number 2. In the stores downtown, we're always followed around just because we're brown. Hair night. Saturday night smells of biscuits and burning hair. Supper done, and my grandmother has transformed the kitchen into a beauty shop. Laid across the table is the hot comb, Dixie peach hair grease, horse hairbrush, parting stick, and one girl at a time. Jackie first, my sister says, our freshly washed hair damp and spiraling over toweled shoulders and pale cotton nightgowns. She opens her book to the marked page, curls up in a chair pulled close to the wood-burning stove, bowl of peanuts in her lap. The words in her book are so small I have to squint to see the letters. Hans Brinker or the Silver Skates. The House at Pooh Corner. Swiss Family Robinson. Thick books. Dog-eared from the handing down from neighbor to neighbor. My sister handles them gently, marks the pages with torn brown pieces of paper bag, wipes her hands before going beyond the hard-bound covers. "Read to me," I say, my eyes and scalp already stinging from the tug of the brush through my hair. And while my grandmother sets the hot comb on the flame, heats it just enough to pull my tight curls straighter, my sister's voice wafts over the kitchen, past the smell of hair and oil and flame, settles like a hand on my shoulder and holds me there. I want silver skates like Hans, a place on a desert island. I have never seen the ocean, but this too I can imagine, blue water pouring over red dirt. As my sister reads, the pictures begin forming as though someone had turned on the television, lowered the sound, pulled it up close. Grainy black and white pictures come slowly at me, deep, infinite, remembered. On a bright December morning long ago, my sister's clear, soft voice opens up the world to me. I lean in, so hungry for it. "Hold still now," my grandmother warns, so I sit on my hands to keep my mind off my hurting head and my whole body still. But the rest of me is already leaving. The rest of me is already gone. Family names. There's James, Joseph, Andrew, Geneva, Annie Mae, William, Lucinda, David, Talmadge. My grandmother says, "Altogether, my mama gave birth to 13 children. Our heads spin at the thought of that many brothers and sisters. 3 died as babies," she says, but only a little of the spinning stops. There's Livonia, Montague, Ilis, Halik, Valley Mae, Verdi, and Alora on my daddy's side. We can't help but laugh each time our daddy tells us the names of his brothers and sisters. His own name, Gunnar, sends us laughing all over again. Gave their kids names that no master could ever take away. What about Bob or Joe? Hope wants to know. What about John or Michael, or something real normal like Hope? Hope is not normal, my sister says, not for a boy. I think your name is a mistake. Maybe they meant to call you Verdi. I'm the great hope of the family, my brother says, just like Grandpa Hope. Just like Hope the Dope, my sister says back. Keep up the arguing, my grandfather says. I'll take you both down to City Hall. People be happy to call you Talmadge and Valley Mae. American Dream. Even when my girls were little, we'd go down there, my grandmother tells us, and people would be marching. The marching didn't just start yesterday. Police with those dogs scared everybody near to death. Just once I let my girls march. My grandmother leans back in her brown chair, her feet still in the Epsom salts water, her fingers tapping out some silent tune. She closes her eyes. I let them, and I prayed. What's the thing, I asked her, that would make people want to live together? People have to want it, that's all. We get quiet. Maybe all of us are thinking about the ones who want it and the ones who don't. We all have the same dream, my grandmother says, to live equal in a country that's supposed to be the land of the free. She lets out a long breath, deep remembering. When your mother was little, she wanted a dog, but I said no. Quick as you can blink, I told her, a dog will turn on you. So my mother brought kittens home, soft and purring inside of empty boxes, mewing and mewing until my grandmother fell in love and let her keep them. My grandmother tells us all this as we sit at her feet, each story like a photograph we can look right into, see our mother there, marchers and dogs and kittens all blending, and us now there in each moment beside her. The fabric store. Some Fridays we walk to downtown Greenville, where there are some clothing stores, some restaurants, a motel, and a 5 and dime store. But my grandmother won't take us into any of those places anymore. Even the 5 and dime, which isn't segregated now, but where a woman is paid, my grandmother says, to follow colored people around in case they try to steal something. We don't go into restaurants because they always seat us near the kitchen. When we go downtown, we go to the fabric store, where the white woman knows my grandmother, from back in Anderson, asks, "How's Gunnar doing? And your girls in New York?" She rolls fabric out for my grandmother to rub between her fingers. They discuss drape and nap and where to cinch the waist on a skirt for a child. At the fabric store, we are not colored or Negro. We are not thieves or shameful or something to be hidden away. At the fabric store, we're just people. Ghosts. In downtown Greenville, they painted over the white-only signs, except on the bathroom doors. They didn't use a lot of paint, so you can still see the words, right there, like a ghost standing in front, still keeping you out. The Leavers. We watch men leave Greenville in their one good suit, shoes spit-shined. We watch women leave in Sunday clothes, hatted and lipsticked and white-gloved. We watch them catch buses in the evening, the black shadows of their backs, the last we see of them. Others fill their cars with bags, whole families disappearing into the night, people waving goodbye. They say the city is a place where diamonds speckle the sidewalk, money falls from the sky. They say a colored person can do well going there. All you need is the fare out of Greenville. All you need is to know someone on the other side waiting to cross you over, like the River Jordan, and then you're in paradise. The beginning of the leaving. When my mother returns from New York, she has a new plan. All of us are going to move there. We don't know any place else but Greenville now. New York is only the pictures she shows us in magazines and the two she has in her pocketbook of our Aunt Kay. In one, there are two other people standing with her. Bernie and Peaches, our mother tells us. We all used to be friends here in Nickeltown. That's all the young kids used to talk about, our grandmother tells us, going to New York City. My mother smiles at us and says, "We'll be going to New York City. I just have to figure some things out first, that's all. I don't know what I'd do without you all up under me," my grandmother says, and there's a sadness in her voice. "Don't know what I'd do," she says again, even sadder this time. As a child, I smelled the air. Mama takes her coffee out to the front porch, sips it slow. 2 steps down, and her feet are covered in grass and dew. "New York doesn't smell like this," she says. I follow her, the dew cool against my feet, the soft hush of wind through leaves. My mother and I, alone together. Her coffee is sweetened with condensed milk, her hair pulled back into a braid, her dark fingers circling her cup. If I ask, she will hold it to my lips, let me taste the bittersweet of it. It's dawn and the birds have come alive, chasing each other from maple to pine and back to maple again. This is how time passes here. The maple will be bare-branched come winter, Mama says, but the pines, they just keep on living. And the air is what I'll remember, even once we move to New York. It always smells like this, my mother says, wet grass and pine, like memory. Harvest time. When Daddy's garden is ready, it is filled with words that make me laugh when I say them. Pole beans and tomatoes, okra and corn, sweet peas and sugar snaps, lettuce and squash. Who could have imagined so much color that the ground disappears and we are left walking through an autumn's worth of crazy words that beneath the magic of my grandmother's hands become side dishes. Grown folks' stories. Warm autumn night with the crickets crying, the smell of pine coming soft on the wind, and the women on the porch, quilts across their laps. Aunt Lucinda, Miss Belle, and whatever neighbor has a breath or two left at the end of the day for sitting and running our mouths. That's when we listen to the grown folks talking. Hope, Dell, and me sitting quiet on the stairs. We know one word from us will bring a hush upon the women, my grandmother's finger suddenly pointing toward the house, her soft-spoken, "I think it's time for you kids to go to bed now." ushering us into our room. So we are silent, our backs against posts and the back of the stairs. Hope's elbows on his knees, head down. Now is when we learn everything there is to know about the people down the road and in the day workhouses, about the sisters at the Kingdom Hall and the faraway relatives we rarely see. Long after the stories are told, I remember them, whisper them back to Hope and Dell late into the night. She's the one who left Nickeltown in the daytime, the one Grandmama says wasn't afraid of anything, retelling each story, making up what I didn't understand or missed when voices dropped too low. I talk until my sister and brother's soft breaths tell me they've fallen asleep. Then I let the stories live inside my head again and again until the real world fades back into cricket lullabies and my own dreams. Tobacco. Summer is over, a kiss of chill in the southern air. We see the dim orange of my grandfather's cigarette as he makes his way down the darkening road. Hear his evening greetings and the coughing that follows them. Not enough breath left now to sing, so I sing for him, in my head where only I can hear. Where will the wedding supper be? Way down yonder in a hollow tree, The old people used to say a pinch of dirt in the mouth can tell tobacco's story. What crops are ready for picking, what needs to be left to grow, what soil is rich enough for planting, and the patches of land that need a year of rest. I do not know yet how sometimes the earth makes a promise it can never keep. Tobacco fields lay fallow, crops picked clean. My grandfather coughs again, and the earth waits for what and who it will get in return. How to listen, number 3. Middle of the night, my grandfather is coughing me upright. Startled. My mother leaving Greenville. It is late autumn now, the smell of wood burning, the pot-bellied stove like a warm, soft hand in the center of my grandparents' living room, its black pipe stretching into the ceiling, then disappearing. So many years have passed since we last saw our father, his absence like a bubble in my older brother's life that pops again and again into a whole lot of tiny bubbles of memory. You were just a baby, he says to me. You're so lucky you don't remember the fighting or anything. It's like erasers come through her memory, my sister says. Erase, erase, erase. But now my mother is leaving again. This I will remember.